The cold rush of the Willamette River had swallowed the scream of one little boy that fateful day, and Daniel Carter's world shattered into a million jagged pieces that he'd spend the next 25 years trying to glue back together. It was a drizzly spring afternoon in Riverside, Oregon, the kind of Pacific Northwest weather that seeped into your bones and made everything feel heavier when 9-year-old Jacob Carter vanished without a trace. Or so everyone thought. Daniel, a sturdy guy in his early 40s back then with calloused hands from stocking shelves at his family's corner grocery store on Main Street, had always been the rock of their little household. His wife Emily taught 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary, the one with the faded red brick walls and the football field where kids dreamed of being the next big high school quarterback. Jacob was their miracle, a scrappy kid with tousled brown hair, a gap-toothed grin that could melt butter, and an endless curiosity that had him collecting baseball cards and Pokémon stickers like they were treasures from some hidden cave. That morning, before school, Jacob had bounded into the store after scarfing down his Eggo Waffles backpack, slung over one shoulder, begging for a pack of Bubblicious gum. "Dad, you gotta see this new Charizard card I traded for at recess yesterday. It's holographic." Daniel had ruffled his son's hair, slipping him an extra Snickers bar from behind the counter. "Just don't tell your mom, buddy. And hey, stay away from the river after school, all right? It's been raining cats and dogs up in the hills, water's rising fast." Jacob had rolled his eyes with that classic kid exasperation promising with a pinky swear before dashing off to catch the yellow school bus that belched diesel fumes outside. Daniel watched him go, waving until the bus rounded the corner by the old lumber mill, never imagining it was the last time he'd see his boy's freckled face light up like that. The storm hit hard that afternoon, a Pacific squall that turned the sky bruise purple, and unleashed sheets of rain that hammered the tin roof of the store like machine gun fire. Daniel was restocking canned soups when old Mrs. Hargrove from the diner next door burst through the door, her apron soaked and her face ashen. "Daniel, kids down by the river floods coming up quick." Someone called the sheriff already. His heart slammed against his ribs like a caged animal. Emily was still at school, wrapping up parent-teacher conferences, so he bolted out without locking up his work boots, splashing through puddles that were already ankle-deep. By the time he reached the muddy banks of the Willamette, sirens wailed in the distance, red and blue lights flickering through the downpour like faulty Christmas bulbs. A cluster of soaked kids from Jacob's class huddled under yellow rain slickers, their faces streaked with mud and tears, while deputies cordoned off the swollen river with yellow tape that flapped wildly in the wind. "Jacob! Jacob! Where are you?" Daniel's voice cracked like thunder, raw and desperate, as he shoved past a uniform scanning the churning brown water that roared like a freight train. One deputy grabbed his arm, his grip firm but kind. "Mr. Carter, easy now. The boys say he slipped on the bank. Tried to grab a ball that rolled in. Divers are on the way." Emily arrived minutes later, her sensible teacher flats caked in mud. Her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored Daniel's own. She didn't scream or collapse. She just stood there, arms wrapped around her middle, staring at the river as if sheer will could summon their son from its depths. The search dragged on into the twilight spotlights, cutting through the gloom like accusatory fingers, while frogmen in wetsuits plunged into the frigid current, surfacing, empty-handed time and again. Hours blurred into a nightmare montage, the hollow thump of helicopters overhead, the crackle of police radios, the sympathetic murmurs from neighbors who'd brought thermoses of coffee and foil-wrapped sandwiches that no one touched. Then, just before midnight, a shout from the bank. "Got something!" And there it was, Jacob's left sneaker, a scuffed red Converse high top, lodged in the mud like a cruel joke from the universe. No body, no sign of struggle, just that lone shoe mocking them with its tiny Velcro strap. The sheriff's report came swift and final the next morning. Accidental drowning presumed lost to the undertow. Case closed. Life goes on for everyone but the Carters. Emily withdrew into herself like a flower, folding against frost. Her once bright laughter replaced by silences that stretched like shadows across their clapboard house on Elm Street. She'd sit in Jacob's room for hours, tracing the faded outlines of his crayon drawings on the walls, dragons and spaceships, and a family of 4 holding hands under a lopsided rainbow, whispering apologies to the empty air. Daniel tried to bridge the gap, bringing her wildflowers from the meadow behind the store, or cooking her favorite pot roast with mashed potatoes, but the words stuck in his throat. Guilt gnawed at him like termites in old wood. He should have picked Jacob up from school, should have enforced the no-river rule stricter. One night, about 3 months in, he found her in the bathroom, a half-empty bottle of sleeping pills scattered like confetti on the tile floor. Her note crumpled in his fist. "Forgive me, Daniel. I had no choice." The coroner called it suicide by overdose, but Daniel knew it was the weight of unspoken secrets that had crushed her. Rumors swirled in Riverside whispers of an affair, money troubles, but Daniel shut them out, burying her next to the plot they'd bought for Jacob someday, under a simple granite stone etched with beloved wife and mother. He sold the house, poured every dime into keeping the grocery store afloat, a stubborn monument to normalcy in a town that pitied him behind closed doors. Poor Dan Carter, they'd say at the VFW barbecues or PTA meetings, can't let go of that boy, still sets a place at the table on his birthday. And they weren't wrong. Daniel left Jacob's room untouched, a time capsule of Little League trophies gathering dust on the dresser, a half-finished model rocket on the desk, and that damn Pokemon binder open to the Charizard page, as if Jacob might walk in any minute, gum-smacking and full of stories. 25 years carved deep lines into Daniel's face, turning his once sandy hair silver, and his broad shoulders slightly stooped from hauling crates alone. The store, Carter's Corner Market, became his anchor, a creaky wooden-floored haven smelling of fresh-baked Wonder Bread and RC Cola, where locals swapped gossip over lottery tickets, and he'd nod along, his smiles polite but hollow. He'd aged into a fixture of Riverside, the widower dad who never remarried, who volunteered at the food bank and coached pee-wee baseball in Jacob's honor, always scanning the bleachers for a face that looked just a little too familiar. Hope wasn't a flame anymore. It was embers banked low, but never quite extinguished. He believed Jacob was out there, maybe adopted by some family in Seattle, or lost in the foster system up north, alive somehow against all odds. That rainy September afternoon, with the Willamette murmuring like an old friend outside the store window, the mailman pushed through the door, shaking off his poncho like a wet dog. "Special delivery for you, Dan. Sign here." It was a yellowed envelope postmarked from Portland, no return address. The paper brittle and foxed, as if it had been hidden in an attic trunk for decades. Daniel's hands trembled as he slid it open behind the counter, the fluorescent buzz overhead suddenly too loud. Inside, a single sheet of onion skin handwriting, shaky like an old man's last testament. "Your son has lived a life that wasn't his own. Jacob," scrawled at the bottom in a child's block letters, faded to gray. Jacob Carter. Daniel's knees buckled. He gripped the edge of the Formica counter, breath coming in ragged gasps, the world tilting like a funhouse mirror. Jacob alive. Not drowned, not gone, but stolen, reshaped into someone else's boy. The note bore a Portland address in the Pearl District, that ritzy stretch of lofts and wine bars where Riverside folks only went for Ducks games or fancy weddings. His mind raced back to that night by the river, a detail he'd buried under layers of grief. An old-timer face, weathered like driftwood, muttering to him in the shadows while deputies packed up. Saw a kid yesterday, red cap like that one, floating downstream, crying his eyes out in the back of a black Lincoln, some suit, driving east toward the city. Portland way, I'd wager. The cops had dismissed it as senile ramble, but now it burned like truth serum in his veins. Daniel locked the store early, the closed sign swinging crooked in the drizzle, and trudged home through streets slick with fallen maple leaves. In Jacob's room, he sank onto the twin bed, the mattress still molded to a 9-year-old's frame, clutching the letter like a grenade. Emily's ghost hovered in the corners, her final words echoing. I had no choice. What had she known? What price had she paid to keep silent? By dawn, with the rain pattering a Morse code of urgency on the roof, Daniel packed a duffel, Jacob's old baseball glove for luck, a thermos of black coffee, Emily's silver locket with their wedding photo inside, and fired up his '98 Ford pickup. The highway to Portland unspooled like a ribbon of fate, evergreens blurring past, under a sky the color of gunmetal. 25 years of waiting, of whispering Jacob's name to the stars, over backyard barbecues, of dodging pitying glances at the annual Riverside Founders' Day parade. It all funneled into this moment, a father's fury and fragile hope colliding like thunderheads. He didn't know what waited in that Pearl District high-rise, a trap, a miracle, or the final nail in his shattered heart. But for the first time since the river stole his boy's scream, Daniel Carter felt alive, the embers roaring back to life as he crossed the state line into the unknown. The rain-slicked streets of Portland gleamed like black mirrors under the sodium glow of street lamps. As Daniel Carter's old Ford pickup rattled into the Pearl District, the engine coughing like it resented the upgrade from Riverside's back roads to this urban jungle of craft breweries and converted warehouses. It was pushing dusk when he pulled up to the sleek high-rise at the address, scrawled on the back of Jacob's letter, Northwest Pearl Tower, a fortress of glass and steel that screamed old money, the kind that bought silence and second chances. Daniel's boots squelched on the marble lobby floor. As he shook off the downpour, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder like a reluctant sidekick, heart hammering harder than the espresso machine at the concierge's marble-topped desk. The doorman, a guy with a buzz cut and a security badge that read Earl, eyed him like he'd wandered in from a Timbers game tailgate. "Can I help you, sir?" Daniel cleared his throat, the words tasting like gravel. "Here to see Margaret Langley, penthouse level. Tell her it's about Jacob Carter." Earl's eyebrows shot up, but he buzzed the intercom without another word, murmuring into it like he was passing state secrets. A beat later, the elevator dinged open and Daniel stepped in the mirrored walls, reflecting a man he barely recognized. Silver-streaked hair, plastered wet jaw set like Portland granite eyes, burning with a mere 25 years in the making. The penthouse doors whispered shut behind him, revealing a world light years from Elm Street, vaulted ceilings with exposed beams, abstract art splashed across walls like Jackson Pollock on steroids, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Willamette's serpentine twist through the city lights. Margaret Langley stood by a grand piano, mid-50s, elegant, in a cashmere sweater, and pearls that probably cost more than Carter's corner market made in a year, her blonde bob framing a face etched with the kind of sorrow that came from too many martinis and not enough sleep. She turned slowly, her blue eyes widening like she'd seen a ghost, which in a way she had. Daniel Carter. she breathed, voice soft as fog off the river. I sent the letter. God, I didn't think you'd come so soon." He dropped his bag with a thud that echoed like a gunshot in the hush. "You drop a bomb like that in the mail and expect me to sit on it? Where's my boy, Margaret? Jacob, alive all these years?" She gestured to a leather Chesterfield by the fireplace, flames crackling low like they were whispering conspiracies. "Sit, please. This isn't easy." Daniel perched on the edge, fists clenched on his knees, as she poured 2 fingers of scotch from a crystal decanter. Glenfiddich, the good stuff, not the bottom shelf rotgut from his store. Her hands shook ice, clinking like wind chimes in a gale. 3 years ago, Ethan, your Jacob, died in a car wreck on I-5. It was ruled an accident, but... She trailed off, sinking into an armchair across from him, her gaze drifting to a silver-framed photo on the mantel. A young man in a white coat stethoscope draped like a medal, smiling that gap-toothed grin Daniel knew better than his own reflection. Jacob grown into a man with broader shoulders and a jawline sharpened by time. But those eyes, freckles, faded, but unmistakable. "Ethan Langley," she said, voice cracking. "That's what we called him. My husband Robert. He runs Langley Memorial Hospital, the chain with clinics from here to Seattle. Our real son, Ethan, was born with a bum heart congenital defect. The doc said wouldn't let him see 10. Robert. He had ambitions. You know, Senate runs board seats, the whole American dream on steroids. A sick kid didn't fit the narrative." Daniel leaned forward, the room spinning like he'd chugged that scotch whole. "So you stole mine, turned him into yours." Margaret's face crumpled, tears carving tracks through her makeup. "It wasn't me. It was Robert. He had eyes everywhere. Private investigators sniffing out suitable replacements. Jacob matched same age build, even that mop of hair. They watched him for weeks, knew his routines, the river spot after school. That storm day, it wasn't an accident. They dosed him with something Benadryl in a soda, made him woozy, scooped him up in a black Lincoln town car while the flood masked the screams. Left the shoe to sell the drowning story. Rage boiled in Daniel's gut, hot as Portland summer pavement, but he swallowed it down, fingers digging into the leather arms. And Emily. My wife, she knew. Margaret nodded, fresh tears spilling. Robert cornered her that night after the search. Showed her photos proof. Said if she talked, you'd both end up in the Willamette feet, first concrete shoes. She signed an NDA, took his hush money to pay off your mortgage, but it ate her alive. That note. No choice. It was about this. Daniel's vision blurred Emily's ghost, materializing in the firelight, her whispers in Jacob's room, the pills scattered like fallen stars. You raised him. What kind of life? Margaret pulled a photo album from a side table, leather-bound and thick as a Bible, sliding it across the coffee table like contraband. A good one, mostly. We homeschooled at first, eased him in. He was terrified those early months' nightmares of the river calling for Daddy in his sleep. But kids adapt, you know. We got him into private school, Little League hell. He even joined the debate club sharp as a tack. Grew into Ethan Langley straight. A student at Lincoln High, then pre-med at Oregon State. Robert pushed him toward the family biz cardiology, ironic as hell treating the hearts his old man broke. She flipped pages, and there he was, Jacob, at 10, awkward in a Two Big Ducks jersey at a tailgate. 15 gangly on a skateboard in Washington Park, roses blooming behind him like forgotten apologies. 22 commencement cap tassel swinging diploma clutched like a shield. Daniel's throat tightened, tracing the arc of a life he'd missed: prom dates, first heartbreaks, the quiet triumphs scribbled in yearbooks. He was happy. Margaret hesitated, fingers lingering on a shot of Ethan at 28, staring out a rain-streaked window at Powell's book's eyes, distant as the Columbia Gorge. Materially, yeah, trust fund summer house, on the coast, the works. But there was always this hole. Around 17, Robert cracked, told him he was adopted, some vague story about a closed adoption. Jacob Ethan dug deeper, hacked school records, pieced together the puzzle. By med school, he knew. Came to me one night, tears streaming. Mom, am I stolen? I couldn't lie. Broke us both. Daniel slammed the album shut, the slap echoing like a gavel. Where's Robert in all this? He confessed before he croaked last month. Heart attack fitting end. Margaret's laugh was bitter as black coffee. He left a confession, yeah, sealed in my safe. But there's more. Ethan found something at the hospital records on shady transplants, black market organs from desperate folks south of the border. Robert's side hustle greased by lobbyists in D.C. Ethan was gonna blow it wide open, go to the feds. They stopped him. That wreck breaks tampered stretch of I-5 with no cameras. Fury and grief warred in Daniel's chest, a storm front colliding. Who? Tell me. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the side table, unknown number insistent as a fire alarm. She glanced at the screen, face paling. They're watching. Robert's old associates, suits with Senate pins. You need to go now. Daniel snatched the album, stuffing it into his duffel, but as he bolted for the elevator, headlights pierced the penthouse windows like accusatory eyes, a black SUV idling curbside wipers, slashing the rain. Daniel, wait. Margaret thrust a USB drive into his hand, small as a quarter cold, as betrayal. Audio files. Robert recorded everything: insurance policy. Get it to someone clean like a PI or Fed. And for God's sake, be careful. The elevator plunged his stomach with it, depositing him back in the lobby where Earl shot him a wary side eye. Outside, the downpour had upgraded to a deluge, Portland's famed liquid sunshine, now a biblical flood. Daniel sprinted to his truck key fob, fumbling in slick fingers, engine roaring to life, just as the SUV peeled from the curb tires, hissing on wet asphalt like a serpent's warning. He floored it, weaving through the pearls one-ways, past food carts, hawking Dungeness crab rolls and voodoo donuts, the neon blur of Burnside Bridge looming ahead. The SUV loomed in his rear view, a shadow growing fangs close enough he could make out the driver's silhouette, broad shoulders glint of a gold watch. Heart pounding like a bass drum at a Blazers game, Daniel yanked the wheel, cutting into a narrow alley behind a microbrewery, the Ford's bumper scraping brick as he gunned it toward the waterfront. Horns blared, a pedestrian in a duck's beanie leaped aside with a curse. Watch it, asshole! But the SUV followed, ramming a dumpster that skidded into their path with a metallic screech. Sparks flew rain, hissing on hot metal, as Daniel barreled onto the Morrison Bridge, the Willamette churning black below like the river that started it all. His phone buzzed in the cup holder, unknown caller, same as Margaret's. He ignored it, swerving into eastbound traffic semis, honking fury as he darted between lanes. The SUV surged closer, sideswiping a Prius that fishtailed into a spine-out. But Daniel spotted his, out the off-ramp to the East Side Industrial District chain-link fences and loading docks where cops patrolled for squatters. He took it hard, tires smoking, the Ford bottoming out on a pothole that jarred his teeth. The pursuer hesitated at the merge, too bulky for the tight turn, and Daniel lost them in the maze of warehouses, pulling into a shadowed lot behind a derelict paper mill engine, idling low as he gasped for air. Safe for now. He fumbled the USB into the dash player, but it was audio only, no visuals, and the truck's tinny speakers crackled to life, with Robert Langley's voice oily smooth as a used car salesman. Yeah, the kids digging too deep found the donor logs, the Bradley connection. We can't have that. One whistle to the Oregonian, and it's all over. Make it look like a wreck breaks on that Beamer of his easy peasy. Tell Tommy it's on him. Owes me from that over 8 campaign favor. A second voice, gravelly and authoritative. Consider it done, Bob. Clean as a whistle. Daniel ripped the USB-free bile rising in his throat. Tommy, as in Senator Thomas Bradley, the golden boy of Oregon politics, all smiles on C-SPAN, with his farm fresh ads and anti-corruption stump speeches. The pieces slotted like a nightmare jigsaw, Robert's empire built on stolen hearts, literal and figurative, Bradley greasing the wheels for federal grants while burying the bodies. Jacob, brilliant, brave. Jacob hadn't just uncovered his own theft. He'd stumbled into a viper's nest of white-collar carnage. Daniel slumped against the wheel, rain drumming the roof like accusatory fingers, the album spilling photos across the passenger seat, his boy stolen and remade dead at 34 for daring to claw back his name. But the embers in Daniel's chest flared hotter now, not just grief, but gasoline-soaked rage. He fired up the engine again, headlights cutting the gloom toward the East Side motels where cash bought no questions anonymity. Tomorrow he'd find Michael Reed, the driver Margaret had whispered about, in a hurried text, Robert's old wheelman, now slinging wrenches at a chop shop in the industrial sprawl. One thread at a time he'd unravel this web, drag the spiders into the light. Jacob deserved that much, a father's reckoning, 25 years late, but coming like a Pacific tsunami. As the truck growled back onto the rain-lashed boulevard, Portland's skyline receding like a guilty witness, Daniel whispered to the dash, "Hold on, kid, Dad's coming for the truth." The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time Daniel Carter pulled into a gravel lot behind Reed's Auto Repair, a squat cinder block shop in Portland's industrial East Side, where rusted carburetors and bald tires littered the chain-link perimeter like forgotten relics. The neon open sign flickered like a dying star, and the air smelled of motor oil and damp concrete, a far cry from the Pearl District's artisanal coffee haze. Daniel's hands shook as he tucked the USB drive and Jacob's photo album into his duffel, the weight of Margaret's revelations and that damning audio file pressing against his ribs like a heart attack waiting to happen. Michael Reed. Robert Langley's old driver was his next lead, the guy who'd ferried a drugged-up Jacob away from the Willamette's muddy banks 25 years ago. Daniel's boots crunched gravel as he pushed through the shop's creaky door, the bell jangling like a warning shot. Inside, a guy in his mid-50s, grizzled with a salt and pepper beard, hunched over a Chevy's engine block, hands black with grease. Michael Reed, Daniel's voice cut through the hum of a classic rock station. Springsteen wailing about rivers and glory days. The man straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that looked older than the shop, his eyes sharp, but weary, like he'd been running from ghosts longer than Daniel. Who's asking Daniel Carter? Jacob Carter's father. Reed froze, the rag dropping to the oil-stained floor. His gaze darted to the shop's windows, scanning the lot, like he expected black SUVs to roll up any second. Jesus, man, you shouldn't be here. They're watching, always watching. Daniel stepped closer, voice low and steady despite the pulse hammering in his ears. Margaret Langley sent me. Said you drove the car that took my boy. I need answers, Reed. Now. Reed's shoulders sagged, and he motioned to a cluttered office in the back. The kind of place where coffee mugs grew mold and invoices yellowed in stacks. All right, Carter, but this ain't a coffee shop chat. You're stirring up a hornet's nest. The office smelled of stale cigarettes, a single bulb casting shadows over a desk buried in auto manuals. Reed locked the door, pulled the blinds, and sank into a creaky chair, gesturing for Daniel to sit on a milk crate. I was just a driver back then. Okay, Robert's errand boy. That day by the river, I didn't know what was in the back seat till we were halfway to Portland. Kid was out cold, slumped in a red cap. Thought he was sick or something till Robert spilled it later. Replacement for his dying boy, Ethan. I wanted out, but Robert had dirt on my sister strung out in rehab. Said he'd ruin her if I squealed. Daniel's fists clenched nails, biting palms. You saw my son crying and did nothing. Reed's eyes dropped to the desk, voice cracking. I'm not proud, man. Kept tabs on him, though, snapped photos when I could like a damn penance. He slid a battered shoebox across the desk, stuffed with Polaroids, and faded Prince Jacob at 12, grinning at a Timberwolves game. 16 in a tux at some fancy gala. 25 in scrubs at Langley Memorial, stethoscope gleaming. Daniel's throat burned as he flipped through the stolen years, each photo a stab wound. He was a Dr. Carter, saved kids' hearts, ironic as hell. But he got curious, started digging into hospital records, old adoption papers. Found out he wasn't Ethan Langley. Then he stumbled onto Robert's side gig organs from south of the border. Poor folks paid pennies to carve 'em up for rich patients. Your boy was gonna blow the whistle. Daniel's hand froze on a photo of Jacob, maybe 30, staring out a hospital window, eyes haunted like Emily's in her final days.
He knew who he was.
Yeah, Reed said, pulling a small notebook from the box, Jacob's diary, leather cover worn soft. Started writing this in med school. Tracked you down to Riverside, once stood outside your store, but chickened out. Scared he'd break your heart all over again. Daniel opened the diary pages, filled with Jacob's neat script. Dreamt of the river again. A man calling my name. Not Ethan, but Jacob. I found an article online. Riverside, Oregon boy vanished. Same day I arrived at the Langleys. Am I him? Another entry months later. Hospital archives, restricted files. Langley's dirty money organs, payoffs to a Senator Bradley. I'm Jacob Carter. I have to find my dad. Tell him everything. Daniel's eyes stung, tears blurring the ink. His boy had been so close, watching from the shadows of Main Street, torn between fear and love. He was gonna confront Robert, Reed said. But Bradley, Senator Thomas Bradley Roberts' political muscle, got wind. That accident on I-5 brakes cut clean job. I heard Robert on the phone planning it. Kept this, he tapped the USB Daniel clutched as my own insurance. Robert's dead. But Bradley's still out there pulling strings. A sudden crash, outside glass shattering in the shop, snapped Daniel's head up. Reed cursed, yanking a tire iron from under the desk. They found us! Move! They bolted through a back door into the rain-soaked lot where a black SUV idled, headlights slicing the dusk. Daniel clutched the diary and USB, sprinting for his truck, as a figure in a dark coat emerged from the shadows, gun glinting like a snake's fang. Reed shoved him behind a dumpster, whispering, "Get to the University Hospital." Jacob hid proof in a safe records room basement. Combo's his real birthday, May 10th, 73. I'll hold him off. Before Daniel could argue, Reed charged the figure, tire iron swinging. A muffled shot rang out, and Reed crumpled, blood pooling black in the rain. Daniel's heart screamed to stay, but his legs carried him to the Ford engine roaring as he peeled out the SUV's tires, screeching in pursuit. Portland's neon maze blurred past food trucks, hipster bars, until he lost them in the tangle of Old Town's alleys, pulling into a dive motel's lot cash for a room no ID. Alone, he opened Jacob's diary again, the final entry gutting him, "Found Dad's store." He looks tired but hopeful. "If I'm Jacob Carter, I owe him the truth. Mom, Emily, she knew, didn't she? I forgive her. She had no choice." Daniel clutched the page, tears falling. Jacob had forgiven Emily, loved her, despite the silence that killed her. Tomorrow, he'd storm the hospital, crack that safe and burn Bradley's empire to ash for Jacob, for Emily, for the years stolen by a river's lie. The rain had finally stopped, leaving Portland's air crisp, with the scent of wet asphalt and pine. As Daniel Carter stood on the banks of the Willamette, the river's surface glinting like polished obsidian under a rare autumn sun. In his calloused hands he held a small paper boat folded from a page of Jacob's old sketchbook. A dragon doodled in crayon, the kind his boy used to draw during Little League rain delays. Riverside, Oregon felt a world away from the city's hustle. But here, where the Willamette cut through both places, Daniel felt tethered to his son, as if the river carried Jacob's whispers across 25 years of grief. His duffel lay at his feet, heavy with Jacob's diary. The hospital files from the secret safe and the USB drive that had cost Michael Reed his life last night. Daniel's eyes traced the current, remembering the day it stole his boy, or so he'd thought, until the truth unraveled like a frayed rope. Jacob alive all those years as Ethan Langley, a doctor saving kids' hearts while uncovering the rot in Robert Langley's empire. Now, with Senator Thomas Bradley behind bars and the Langley scandal plastered across every newsstand from Portland to D.C., Daniel faced the final piece of his journey, not justice, but closure. 2 days ago, in the university hospital's basement, Daniel Detective James Walsh and Dr. Sarah Miller had cracked open the safe Jacob mentioned in his diary. The digital keypad beeped acceptance at May 10, 1973, Jacob's real birthday, and revealed a file labeled Langley Project Ethan Replacement. Pages detailed Robert's scheme scouting Jacob by the river, the staged drowning, the payoffs to silence Emily. Worse, it exposed a black market organ ring. Desperate immigrants paid pennies for kidneys. Livers sold to elite patients through Langley Memorial's back channels, with Bradley funneling federal grants to cover the tracks. Jacob had found it, all his notes tucked in the file, "I'm Jacob Carter. Langley stole me, and Bradley helped. They're killing people for profit. I have to tell Dad." A second USB held patient logs, dates matching unexplained deaths in border clinics. It was enough to bury Bradley, whose arrest hit CNN like a bombshell. Senator indicted in decades-old kidnapping, organ trafficking. Daniel's testimony, alongside Walsh's old college buddy, Detective Mark Sullivan, sealed it. Sullivan had dug up the tampered brakes from Jacob's accident on I-35, a death dressed up as chance. Now, Daniel was back in Portland for one last meeting, not with cops or reporters, but with Margaret Langley. He'd called her yesterday, voice steady, despite the ache in his chest, asking to meet at Sky Garden, the upscale restaurant where she and Jacob Ethan used to share Wednesday lunches. The place perched atop a boutique hotel, all glass and cedar, with a view of the Willamette snaking through downtown's steel spires. Daniel arrived early, his flannel shirt and work boots out of place among the linen napkins and artisanal charcuterie boards. Margaret sat by the window, gray suit impeccable, but her face carried new lines etched by the Fed's interrogations and the media's relentless hounding. 2 plates waited at her table, one untouched, as if Jacob might still stroll in with his stethoscope and a tired smile. Daniel, she said, standing as he approached, her voice fragile as spun glass. I didn't think you'd want to see me again. He slid into the chair opposite, setting his duffel by his feet, like a soldier's pack. Needed to. For Jacob. Margaret's eyes glistened, but she held his gaze, hands folded tight around a coffee cup, gone cold. I read the papers. Bradley's done for 25 years, maybe more. Robert's name dragged through the mud, our hospitals under audit. It's over, isn't it? Daniel shook his head, slow and deliberate. Not till I settle things with you. You raised my boy, loved him, but you were part of stealing him. I need to know, did he ever feel like he belonged? She flinched, as if the question were a blade, then reached for a locket around her neck, clicking it open to reveal a tiny photo of Jacob at 16, laughing at a beach bonfire. He was my son Daniel in every way that mattered. I taught him to tie his shoes, cheered at his debate. Meets stayed up when he cried over college rejections. But there was always this shadow. He'd stare out windows, sketch rivers he couldn't name. When he learned he was adopted, he didn't hate me, he hugged me, said I was a victim too. But after he found out about the kidnapping the organs, he changed, started pulling away, working late at the hospital, chasing the truth. Her voice broke, and she pressed the locket shut. I loved him, Daniel, more than Robert ever could. Daniel's throat tightened, Jacob's diary flashing in his mind. Mom, Margaret knew, but she's trapped too. I forgive her. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box, sliding it across the table. Open it. Margaret's fingers trembled as she lifted the lid, revealing a silver chain with a locket inside a photo of Jacob at 8, gap-toothed and grinning, taken a month before the river. It was his, Daniel said, voice rough as gravel. Found it in his room back home. You should have it. He called you. Mom loved you, even knowing what you did. Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks, her manicured nails clutching the locket like a lifeline. Why give me this? I helped destroy your family. Daniel leaned forward, eyes steady. Because Jacob forgave you. And I'm trying to. He had 2 mothers, 2 lives. You gave him one of them, the good parts. I can't erase that. She nodded, lips trembling, and slipped the locket into her purse. The feds offered me a deal, no charges if I testified. I told them everything, even about Emily. Robert threatened her life, yours too. She kept quiet to protect you both. I'm selling the house, starting over, somewhere quiet, maybe Astoria. I set up a fund for the organ scam victims, all my assets. For Ethan, for Jacob. Daniel nodded, the weight of her words settling like silt. He'd want that. As they parted, Margaret touched his arm, voice barely a whisper. Check his diary again, Daniel. The last page folded shut. He left something for you. Daniel left Sky Garden, the city's hum fading as he drove back to Riverside, the paper boat still tucked in his coat. At home, he sat on Jacob's bed, the room frozen in time. Baseball glove on the chair, Pokemon cards fanned out like a shrine. He opened the diary to the final page, unfolding a creased note in Jacob's adult scrawl. Dad, I found you. Saw you at the store, still hanging my old drawings. I wanted to walk in, tell you I'm Jacob Carter, but I was scared of hurting you after all this time. I'm exposing Langley's crimes, the organ deals, then I'm coming home to explain everything. We can't get back 25 years, but maybe we can start new ones. Your son, Jacob. Tears blurred the ink, Daniel's chest heaving, as he clutched the note, Jacob's hope slicing deeper than any loss. His boy had been steps away, ready to bridge the years, only to be silenced by Bradley's goons. Later that day, Daniel walked to the Willamette's edge in Riverside, where the river ran slower, fringed with cottonwoods dropping golden leaves. The town was quiet, kids biking past the diner, the church bell tolling for evening service. He knelt by the bank, setting the paper boat on the water, its crayon dragon fading as it caught the current. "Jacob," he whispered, voice steady for the first time in years. "It's done. Bradley's locked up the truths out. Your mom's at peace now, and so are you. I'm proud of you, kid Dr. Hero, my boy." The boat drifted spinning among fallen leaves, free at last. As he stood, a breeze ruffled his hair, soft as a child's touch, and he smiled, feeling Jacob's presence in the ripple of the river. Back at the store, Daniel found a package from Detective Sullivan Jacob's effects from the crash, including a key old and tarnished to a lockbox Jacob had kept as a kid. Inside, among marbles and baseball cards, was a folded letter from 9-year-old Jacob. "Dad, you and Mom are the best. Let's always be together. Love, Jake." Daniel pressed it to his chest, the pain sharp but warm, a wound healing at last. That night at James Walsh's house, Daniel ate pot roast with James's wife Karen, their kids giggling over Fortnite in the next room. "Over beers," James asked. "What's next?" "Dan." Daniel sipped the answer clear as the stars outside. "Keep the store running. Maybe join that missing kids charity use, what I've learned to help other parents. And I'm reaching out to Margaret, adding to her fund. Jacob would have wanted us to build something good from this." James raised his bottle. "To Jacob." Daniel clinked, voice firm. "To my son." As he walked home under Riverside's starry sky letter in his pocket, Daniel felt lighter. The river's song no longer a dirge, but a lullaby carrying Jacob's love across time, binding them forever in the quiet flow of a new beginning.